Your body is folding forward. Your knees press into soft earth. The fire throws shadows across the cave wall, and your hands grip a smooth root someone wedged between two rocks hours ago. You are alone, but you are not alone. Three women sit behind you, one pressing her palm into the small of your back, another murmuring something low and rhythmic. This is 40,000 years ago. This is how your ancestors entered the world. And today, in 2026, the global cesarean section rate has passed 21%, meaning 1 in 5 births now happens through surgical incision. How did humans survive for 300,000 years without operating rooms, without anesthesia, without hospitals? Your species has been giving birth since long before it was your species. Australopithecus afarensis, the small-brained walker who lived over 3 million years ago, already had the problem. Walking upright reshaped the pelvis. It became narrower, tighter, mechanically efficient for two-legged striding. But brains were growing, heads were getting bigger, and birth became harder. Paleoanthropologist Karen Rosenberg studied pelvic fossils from our ancestors and found that by the time Homo erectus arrived, about 1.9 million years ago, the birth canal had become a twisted passage. The baby had to rotate mid-descent, turning its head to slip through the narrowest points. No other primate does this. Your body remembers that compromise in every contraction, so your ancestors gave birth in pain. But they also gave birth in community. Anthropologist Wenda Trevathan examined birth practices among modern foraging societies and found something universal: women almost never gave birth alone. The Kung people of the Kalahari, studied extensively by Richard Lee in the 1960s, had a word for it. Birth was women's work, but it was collective work. Experienced women attended. They knew the rhythm of labor. They knew when to press on the lower back, when to encourage walking, when to let the mother rest. They had watched dozens of births. They had touched the body in labor, felt the progression, learned the signs of trouble. This knowledge was not written down. It was transmitted through observation, through touch, through presence. But what did they actually do? Reconstructing ancient birth is difficult because soft tissue does not fossilize and direct evidence is rare. But anthropologist Sheila Kitzinger documented birth practices across 43 traditional societies in the 1970s and found recurring patterns. Most women labored in an upright or semi-upright position, squatting, kneeling, sitting on a birth stool, or leaning forward against a support. Gravity helped. The baby descended with less muscular effort. The pelvis could open slightly wider in these positions, a few millimeters that mattered. Lying flat on your back is a modern invention, designed for the convenience of the physician, not the mechanics of your body. Pain was managed, but not eliminated. Women used rhythmic movement, swaying or rocking through contractions. They used sound, low moaning that helped release tension in the pelvic floor. Massage was common, especially firm pressure on the sacrum, the flat bone at the base of the spine. Anthropologist Dana Raphael found that the Kung women made a paste from roasted roots and rubbed it into the laboring woman's abdomen and thighs. Whether it had pharmacological effects or simply provided comfort through touch is unclear. But touch itself is analgesic. Modern studies show that supportive touch during labor measurably reduces cortisol and increases endogenous oxytocin. Your ancestors knew this without the studies. Some groups used medicinal plants. The Shoshone people of the Great Basin gave laboring women a tea brewed from blue cohosh root. The Deni people of the Amazon used a bark infusion from a tree they called birth opener. Ethnobotanist James Duke cataloged over 200 plants used traditionally to stimulate contractions, ease pain, or reduce bleeding. Not all of them worked. Some were ceremonial, but some contained real alkaloids, real tannins, real compounds that affected smooth muscle or clotting factors. Modern pharmacology has isolated active ingredients from several of these plants. Ergot, derived from a fungus used in European midwifery, became the basis for synthetic drugs that prevent postpartum hemorrhage. Your ancestors were experimenting with biochemistry for millennia before the word existed. But birth is not always straightforward. What happened when labor stalled? When the baby was positioned wrong? When bleeding started and would not stop? Archaeologist Sharon DeWitt analyzed skeletal remains from medieval Europe and found that women who survived childbirth multiple times had distinct wear patterns on their pelvic bones, markers of repeated strain. But she also found remains of young women whose pelvic architecture suggested they had died in or shortly after labor. The bones of unborn or partially born infants were sometimes found still lodged in the birth canal. These were the births where nothing could be done. The mother died, the baby died, and the group buried them and mourned and continued. Maternal mortality in foraging societies is hard to estimate because we have limited data. But anthropologist Kim Hill studied the Ake people of Paraguay and found a maternal mortality rate of about 1 in 100 births. That is roughly 50 times higher than the rate in high-income countries today. It is sobering. But it also means that 99 out of 100 births, women survived without antibiotics, without blood transfusions, without surgical intervention. How? Selection pressure was brutal. Women whose pelvic shape allowed easier passage had more surviving children. Babies whose head size stayed within deliverable limits were more likely to be born alive. But humans did not evolve their way out of the problem entirely. Instead, your species evolved a workaround. Your brain continues growing after birth. You are born neurologically unfinished. A newborn horse walks within an hour. A newborn human cannot even lift its own head. Anthropologist Ashley Montagu called human infants extragestational fetuses, meaning the real gestation is 18 months, but the last 9 happen outside the womb because the head is already too large. You traded precociousness for brain size. Your ancestors gave birth to helpless infants who required constant care, and that necessity reshaped human social structure. Which brings us back to the cave, to the women sitting behind you, to the hand on your back. Birth became social because it had to. Anthropologist Sarah Hurdy argues that cooperative breeding, the practice of sharing infant care across multiple caregivers, is what allowed humans to raise such expensive, slow-growing offspring. But cooperation started earlier. It started in labor. Trevathan calls this obligate midwifery. Unlike other primates, who often give birth alone and in silence, humans needed help. The baby emerges facing backward, away from the mother. She cannot easily clear its airway or untangle the cord. Someone else has to catch the baby, to guide it, to assess it. And so birth became a moment that required trust, communication, coordination. Did ancient humans have specialized midwives? Not in the formal sense. But older women who had given birth themselves, who had attended many labors, accumulated expertise. Anthropologist Polly Weissner studied the Inga people of Papua New Guinea and documented how knowledge about difficult births was passed through stories. Women described past labors in detail, narrating what worked, what failed, what signs preceded disaster. These stories functioned as case studies. They built a distributed knowledge base. When a young woman went into labor, she was attended by women who carried the accumulated experience of generations. And yet, even with attendance, even with knowledge, some births went wrong. Obstructed labor, where the baby cannot pass through the pelvis, would have been a death sentence. There is no evidence that ancient humans performed cesarean sections on living mothers. The surgery was described in Roman texts, but only as a last-ditch effort to save the baby after the mother had died. A living woman could not survive abdominal surgery without anesthesia, antiseptics, and sutures. The operation that now saves millions was unavailable to your ancestors. If the baby would not come, both lives were lost. But there is one archaeological case that suggests intervention. At the site of Vlasak in Serbia, archaeologists uncovered a 7500-year-old burial, a woman, around 25 years old, buried in a flex position. Between her legs, the skeleton of a full-term fetus, positioned as if birth had been attempted but not completed. But here is the striking detail. The woman's pelvis showed marks consistent with attempts to widen the birth canal. Cut marks on the bone. Someone had tried to save her. They had tried to create space. It did not work. But they tried. Your ancestors were not passive. They problem-solved. They innovated within brutal constraints. Anthropologist Wenda Trevathan points out that the universality of birth attendance suggests it emerged early, possibly with Homo erectus, possibly earlier. For hundreds of thousands of years, women helped other women give birth. They held space. They held bodies. They held knowledge. Now ask yourself, what changed? Why does 1 in 5 births today require surgery? Part of the answer is survival. Babies who would have died in obstructed labor now live. Mothers who would have bled out now survive. Cesarean sections, when medically necessary, are life-saving. But the rate varies wildly. In Finland, it is 16%. In Turkey, it is 54%. In Brazil, in private hospitals, it tops 80%. The procedure has become routine, scheduled, sometimes chosen for convenience. The World Health Organization states that cesarean rates above 10 to 15% are not associated with further reductions in maternal or infant mortality. Above that threshold, you are cutting into bodies that do not need cutting. And something else has changed. Birth moved from the social space into the medical space. Anthropologist Robbie Davis Floyd calls modern hospital birth technocratic, meaning it is structured around machines, protocols, and institutional efficiency. You labor on your back under fluorescent lights. You are monitored electronically. Your contractions are graphed. If labor slows, it is augmented with synthetic hormones. If it does not progress on schedule, surgery is offered. The people in the room are strangers. The hand on your back, if there is one, belongs to someone who clocked in for a shift. This is not to romanticize the past. Women died in childbirth. Babies died. Infection, hemorrhage, eclampsia, obstructed labor, all of these killed without antibiotics, without transfusions, without surgical options. Modern medicine has saved millions of lives, but it has also pathologized a process that, for most women, is physiological, not pathological. Birth is treated as a medical emergency by default, and when you treat every birth as high risk, you intervene more. You disrupt the hormonal feedback loops that regulate labor. You increase the likelihood that intervention becomes necessary. Your body still carries the blueprint. The same oxytocin that floods your brain during orgasm drives contractions in labor. The same endorphins that dull pain after intense exercise dull pain between contractions. The same autonomic nervous system that governs digestion and heartbeat governs cervical dilation. Birth is involuntary. You cannot force it. You cannot schedule it precisely. You can only create conditions where your body feels safe enough to let go. And for 300,000 years, those conditions included dim light, familiar faces, freedom to move, and the presence of women who had done this before. Today, you are more likely to give birth under institutional protocols than ancestral rhythms. And perhaps that is fine. Perhaps modern medicine is worth the trade-off. But it is worth asking what was lost: the knowledge held by hands, the reassurance of presence, the trust in your body's competence. These are not superstitions. They are adaptive strategies refined over millennia. And they still work. Your body is folding forward. Your knees press into the floor. Someone's hand is on your back. But now the room is bright and sterile. The people around you wear gloves. And you are wondering if your body still remembers what your ancestors knew by instinct: how to open, how to yield, how to bring new life into the world without anyone needing to save you.